Ever wonder how artists go from unknown to unforgettable? The University of Arts and Design just launched How Artists Become Known. It's a free seminar series, and we're starting with Van Gogh. Watch now at uad.education. Welcome to the Make and Design podcast. I'm Carina, and recently in my studio, I have been doing a lot of sewing. I have pulled out some of my fabrics. I've been working on some things. In fact, I have had a mission to remove everything related to my business, the university, all of my crafting projects from the house into my barn, or I have a shed that's like my craft shed. And between these two things, the goal is to rid my house of anything related to the businesses. This is kind of a first for me because for 18 years since, my children were very little, or actually brand spanking new, I have always had my businesses integrated into our family life. And last year when we built the barn and my office is out here and all of my stuff and my YouTube channel, like everything is out here, it just made a lot of sense to try to finally make a split, after 18 and a half years. And so I've been sewing a lot more. I've got my fabrics out here. I've built some fabric shelves even for in my office so that there's more room for fabric out here. And it's just been really fun to have all of my supplies move its way into the barn. Because I've been sewing and doing a lot more fabric, I was just thinking about how when it comes to sewing, we think that the most important part is actually the sewing part. And it actually isn't. Any quilter can tell you that there are two other pieces that might be as important or even more important than the actual sewing. I don't know if you had this, but when my children were really little, they loved to sew on my sewing machine. And so we'd get out the machine and they would do the sewing part. Well, the sewing part was pretty easy and it was fun because you're seeing the needle move, you're seeing the thread get put together, and you're seeing the final product all come together. But the two other pieces that I'm talking about are the things that come before that. The first one is the cutting. The second one is the pressing. And a lot of times, part of the reason so many of us love buying pre-cut kits is because we don't love cutting all the fabric, because cutting is a very precise thing that needs to happen, especially if you're quilting or even if you're making like children's clothes, which is what I did for most of my younger career, is a lot of kids sewing patterns. And so the clothing has to be cut really nicely. And then secondly, the thing that I think we dismiss way too much is the pressing. The way we press everything together makes it lie flat, especially seams, so that when you're sewing together, everything looks beautiful. Everything comes together really cleanly. And I don't think we put enough emphasis on the whole idea of sewing really comes down to our cutting and our pressing. These two things are not very exciting. In fact, we might even call them tedious, but they're definitely a part of the process. And because they're part of the process, they're a necessary thing that we have to do, and it makes the sewing even more enjoyable, and it makes the end product even more enjoyable. This is not unlike a design or an art business. There are pieces of the process that are things we have to do, but might not be that glamorous, that fun. And I think that we forget that almost everything that we really actually enjoy in life usually takes a certain amount of preparation and skill. So what do I mean by that? So in a design business, I like to talk about the design process model. And if you don't know about my design process model and you want to learn more, if you go to uad.education, to our university website, if you click on media, you can go watch an entire video I did teaching about the design process model. It's under a webinar I did called Why Talented Designers Stay Stuck. And you just need to click on uad.education, click on media, and you'll see that webinar under there if it's still available. So go check it out. I think it'll help you see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about design process model. So design process model, the reason I talk about it is because it shows some of the yicky steps that nobody likes doing, but they're a necessary part of us selling and making money on our design work. And a lot of that has to do with production. Production's the part that gets almost everybody stuck, at least in my programs. Maybe you are excellent at production, but let me define it for you so you understand what I'm talking about. A good production process will define whether the product is RGB or CMYK. That means it is either set up for printing, immediate with a printing press, or it's set up to be sold online in some format. Okay, that's RGB or CMYK. The next is whether it needs bleeds or not. Once again, this is a printing process. So what we're preparing it for is our customer. So if it has a really good printing process, right, then it's probably going to need bleeds. We need to know how much those bleeds need to be built for. We need to talk to our printer to see what they want for it, right? If it doesn't have bleeds, maybe it's being used digitally, or it's going to be cut in a different way, or even individually, which is why it wouldn't need bleeds, okay? Production also usually includes instructions. Maybe it includes a terms of use. Sometimes it includes a video to teach people how to use the product. Sometimes it includes a blog post that tells you and gives you step-by-step instructions. Everything in production is meant to help a customer get the product and use it easily. That's it. And this part of the process is not very fun for us as designers. Most of us really enjoy coming up with wonderful ideas and actually creating the final product. That's why we became artists and designers, so we could make the thing. And that's why so many artists have 200 pieces sitting in their house that aren't for sale, as a print, that aren't for sale as a product, that are not for sale, for the actual physical good. It's because we really enjoy having ideas about it. And then the second thing we have fun doing is actually making it. So then when we have to get into the step of production, it feels boring. It feels like something we don't want to do. But to me, this is just the cutting and pressing process of sewing. That once we get used to the idea of it and we get used to making sure it happens as part of our process, then it's not that big of a deal. We realize, hey, this is just part of this process, and I am going to press all of these pieces and fix the seams, and I am going to cut all of these pieces as perfectly as I can so that I can sew it together really nicely, right? The thing that's so hard about production and sales, or in the case of sewing, pressing or cutting, is that it's so unglamorous. It's a repeated step, and it makes the finished thing look effortless to everybody else. Notice that they only usually notice if you make mistakes, right? Instead, like when you do these steps and you follow through really cleanly, it looks effortless. It looks easy. When you and I both know it is not. Building a design business, not easy. Building a beautiful quilt, not easy. Crafting and designing the most perfect 3D die cut, not easy. Creating an incredible printable for a teacher that is Shakespeare inspired, not easy. And yet, there are those who think that it's super fast and easy to create these things. What I would tell you is do not forget the boring steps are what make this work happen. The boring steps are what makes you successful. It is all of the steps that nobody else wants to do, but you're willing to do. List your product, work with the manufacturer, make cold calls, build your wholesale alignment sheet, right? It's like all of those things that make it all happen. And they're boring, they're tedious, but they're just a part of the process. And I know you can do it. And especially if you look at it as, here's a piece of the process, and I just need to embrace that this piece is going to make me consistent. It's going to be boring, but I'm going to figure out great ways to make it a little bit more interesting, right? And I hope that even if you don't sew, you understood my analogy here, and that you can find some happiness, maybe even some joy in these unglamorous repeated steps that we have to do to build the most fantastic design or art business. Want to hang out more? Go to designsweetcourses.com/free to get our weekly freebies and patterns, die cut files, and more. Can't wait to see you there. I have a gift for you. My third book, The Intentional Design Year, is out, and I want to give you access to read it. To get the digital copy for 1 month for free, go to www.designsweetcourses.com/intentional. Make sure and do the www. Because for some reason, that's the only way it will work. Anyway, this will get you free access to read the book for an entire month. If you love it, you can always go to Amazon and get the whole book plus the prompt journal.